We talked to a couple of different people, 4 people or something like that, and all the people we talked to were willing to give us money.
It was very hard work. I had to knock on lots of doors and found it very slow and frustrating.
We met this guy. He quickly, he took a quick look at our search engine. We chatted with him a little bit. He said, oh, I'd be interested in investing,
We negotiated over several months, and they went through 2-3 board meetings, all got passed. Eventually, at the final board meeting, they said, no, we're not interested, and we're not really going to tell you why.
So he said, I don't want you guys to have to, take too low a valuation or to have to worry too much about these money things right now. So he went back to his car, came back with his checkbook, and he wrote us a check for $100,000.
There's a lot of opportunity out in the world by doing things a bit differently than other companies have done them. And I'm sort of amazed more people don't do this. And I'm going to use Google as an example of a way of doing things differently. So I had a computer. I was lucky enough to have a computer in my house at age 6 because my father was a computer science professor. At a pretty young age, I wanted to be an inventor. And actually, I read a autobiography of Tesla. And Tesla is the guy who invented AC power and generators and all sorts of things that we use today. And he barely was able to support his work. He's probably one of the greatest inventors of all time. What I should really do is start a company or be a professor, someplace that I could have a lot of influence on what happens in the world. Raised an angel fund in 1998. Pretty straightforward process. It still took several months, but there was a lot of people who wanted to invest, and it took us time because you want to do these things right. And one of our original angels, Ram Shriram, is still on our board and still very helpful to the company. So it's important to get the right people involved, and sometimes that will probably always take time. We raised a VC round in May '99. We have John Doerr from Kleiner. He's one of the main VCs in the Valley, and also Mike Moritz from Sequoia. And I think Google's a pretty good example of why products and technology are important. The common wisdom is that marketing is what really matters. I think that sort of misses one key thing, which is the internet. So I'd argue that most companies are actually innovating only in business space. So to do interesting things, you have to do pretty broad. You have to have pretty broad understanding. There aren't very many good examples of this. I don't think there are that many companies that have really succeeded because they had great technology. I'd argue Google is a pretty good example, but there aren't that many examples. So having this vision about where things are going to go is really important. We grew with virtually no advertising, and in about 3 years, we've become the largest search provider on the internet. And that's basically because we have a product that people want. As entrepreneurs, or as thinking about how you can make an impact in the world, you say, how can we have innovation in the world? Why aren't all these big companies doing the right thing? I guess I've found even at Google, when you start to have large teams working on anything, you get above about 10 people, it's really hard to be innovative. It's hard to do things differently. But I won't tell you how many people in the company argued with me on this point, really violently. And it almost didn't happen, and actually it's been a very good business for us, and as a result we're profitable, and from other sources. And the basic idea is the last point I make, which is you want to find things that seem wrong. And I know this sounds very negative, like you walk around the world getting upset about things. But actually that turns out to be important. But anyway, it's good to keep track of costs of things because that's really what drives adoption. You look at something like 802.11, which is the wireless networking. It's dropped in price tremendously, and in fact, it's down to about $60. You sort of think about, well, if I have $60 for a high-speed wireless network, that operates over a couple hundred feet, maybe I'm going to start to put that everywhere. But the price is really, really important. And you also notice notebooks are way more expensive than desktop machines, which is also not probably commonly known. So the industry is very slow to notice these things. Are there great opportunities in all of these numbers? Certainly. There's great opportunities for companies in all of these things. You just need to keep track of them. I'm just going to show you how much power things use. Disks use like 5 watts or something. Go to this slide. If you want to power your disk for a while, you need like, a pound of batteries is basically how it works out. And this is why laptops don't really have battery life. Because I saw at the TED conference yesterday, it was really exciting, kind of basic technology thing. And I thought I'd show this to you because I think if you base companies on things like this, you can find a good business. I don't think robotics is necessarily a great business. But if you find some place where there's a good business opportunity and sort of a technological breakthrough, then you're in a really strong business position. They figured out that cockroaches and things like that can go through, if you look on the right-hand side here, they can go through this kind of very rough terrain without even slowing down at all. It's because the cockroach's legs are springy. So this robot that has no control system. Those are just motors that are spinning. And this is like an order of magnitude better than all of the robots that have existed. And the reason is the legs are springy. And so the legs basically do the control automatically, mechanically, rather than using electronics. Having this technology would be a real help, right? You'd probably be able to compete really well against the people who are building wheeled robots or much more complicated things. In fact, they even put this in a lake and it can swim, and it goes right out of the lake onto land, and it's pretty incredible. So there's a lot of things like this in the world. I mean, it's not necessarily lots, but there's enough to start companies based on. And if you start a company on one of these things, I'd argue you're likely to be a lot more successful than if you're just using business. I'm talking about this like really fancy scooter, and you kind of think he's crazy if you see if you read the press about him. So he has this scooter that costs $30,000, and it's like, why would you want that, right? And it's very cool technologically and all these things, and it may or may not be successful as a business. Sort of related to this point, a lot of companies get started purely to make money, and they almost always fail. And I'd argue that the main reason is that how much money do you need? So what happens is companies get to the stage where they're worth some amount of money, and then they get sold, and then something bad happens to them because the entrepreneur no longer cares about it. Right? I think if you look at the trend is towards employees being treated better and better because basically in a company all you have is employees. You just ask the right questions about what's going on and get people motivated to do the right things. It helps if all the people in your organization are broad enough or interested enough that they can deal with some of the details in the organization. We have a tremendous amount of data available to the company, everyone in the company, and they can look at how much money we made in the last 5 minutes, or they can look at all sorts of things about the company. And we fight really hard to keep that available to everyone in the company because we think it's really important for decision making. I don't know. The only other thing I would tell you is to think big is really important, and that's an unusual thing. I'll talk more about that actually. Hiring is another thing I think that really people don't focus on enough. Hiring is a really big deal, and you want to have pretty tight control over it. Excelling at unrelated activities is a pretty good predictor in our experience. If somebody has run a marathon, in really good time, they tend to be a good employee because they're just a really motivated person. They get really excited about things. I think the one that's most often ignored is they ask sort of why not. So there are lots of people who will tell you, no, you can't do that. And there's a few people who say, why can't we do more? Finding the people who, are going to ask you, why can't we do more, are the kinds of people you want in your company, right? Because that will get you further. A lot of internet things especially, but a lot of technology companies can be prototyped very cheaply. You can get pretty far with a couple of people in a garage and a little bit of money. The other thing I noticed about a lot of companies that are being brought into the world now in the Valley is that they're often afraid to solve the whole hard problem. If you're going to build, a company and you're only like one piece of the puzzle, it's pretty tough. I mean, you can do it, but you have to make a lot of deals, and they have to be the right deals, and there has to be enough people. There can't be monopolies, or you'll be in trouble. And it's fine to pick a hard problem and solve the whole thing. I don't think this is done enough. And of course, if you have a single supplier, consumer, or deal, it's pretty much a disaster because those people will, give you lots of trouble. I'd say don't settle in your early stages no matter what. People often get worried, they have this idea or they've been working on something and they're like, oh, how much money will I have to give, how much equity will I have to give to the other founders? You shouldn't be worried about that. I remember this great story from Andy Bechtolsheim, who's one of the Sun founders and is one of our angel investors. When they were starting Sun, I forget who went to, I think Vinod went to Andy and said, I want to start this company. And Andy said, oh, that's fine. You could take the technology for $50,000. And Vinod says, no, I want to pay you like 30% of the equity, and I want you to work in the company. And, you see Sun did pretty well, right? And Vinod doesn't regret that, I don't think. And I don't regret, sharing my equity with Sergey, my co-founder. I'm really, really happy to have him around, and it's been amazingly important, and I feel, great about that, and I feel great about the equity we gave to our initial investors. That's not to say you should give a lot of equity to investors. You should get a good deal, of course, especially with investors. In fact, Andy doubled our valuation. We were asking for a particular valuation. He says, no, I think you guys should have twice that valuation. And negotiating as an investor, this is a crazy thing, right? So the point is, if you get the right investors, things will work out well.